Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're doing a legislative update. We are about to head into crossover in Virginia's 2018 legislative session. That will happen at midnight tomorrow. And we're checking in with some organizations here in Northern Virginia about where the bills that they are watching or sponsoring or promoting or have an interest in stand at this moment. And my first guest is John Horejsi from SALT, Social Action Linking Together. Welcome, John.
Glad to be here, delighted.
So you have been at this longer than anyone I know. 1983.
Yes, it's rather incredible, but you know, when you're having fun, it's...
You keep doing it.
Yes.
And so
you keep coming back.
You do. And so you do a great job, I think, in not only organizing people around a lot of different kinds of bills that are really focused on equality and opportunity and you know, meeting the needs of a lot of marginalized and underserved communities in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
People who usually are not at the policy-making table.
Right, but so
do not have a voice. Yes.
Exactly, and so you've been doing this since 1983, and so you've seen the birth of a lot of bills that have taken a long time to get where they are. And so I am very interested because I get your emails, and anyone can get your emails by signing up.
Absolutely, we encourage that. Yes.
So you do these wonderful updates. So tell us what you're watching and what you have hopes for and what you were sorry to see die.
Well, one I'm really kind of excited about because we got word that in the prison system that with the video visitation that they were no longer allowing in-person visits.
So it was a trade-off. If you did the video visitation, they were going to cut back on the in-person visits.
And that became really a source of concern to us because the studies show that the people who have direct contact with family and people in the community are more successful when they get out. Their reentry is more successful and their return rate to prison is reduced considerably. And so to head this off, we have a bill, and it's 797, and it passed the House 99 to nothing.
Yay! That's a victory if ever I've seen a victory.
Well, it's rare. I don't think we've ever had that before, the entire House. So it being sent right now, it's already crossed over
to the Senate.
Even though tomorrow is crossover, it's already preceded the crossover, and it's already in the Senate Rehab and Social Service committee on the Senate side, and I think it's going to do very well there. And so we're really a little disappointed in the bill because the Department of Corrections came out because we also had a provision that they had to keep the rates for the video visitations at a minimum, and so they objected, so that was dropped from the bill. It was amended, but we'll keep an eye on it, and if the rates are out of line, we'll come back with another bill. So that's the way we operate, kind of
incrementally, right?
Incrementally, yes, yeah. So another bill that we've been quite excited that has taken all the oxygen out of our priorities has been the solitary confinement.
Right.
Prisoners, you know, are in about the size of a car space, kept there 23 hours a day, and they get 1 hour out in a little pen that isn't much bigger without any individual contact, and they even push the food through a little slot in the door. And so we have been working with the Department of Corrections to establish a step-down program so that people in solitary confinement are given an opportunity to have a goal, and if they meet that goal, they can have their time reduced. And
that sounds very reasonable. In fact, just the whole use of solitary confinement probably needs to be reevaluated and how it's used in prisons?
Yes, and it's the use that is the issue with us because we keep hearing about people In fact, we were scheduled to visit Red Onion, and at the last minute they dropped us from the visit, but to let the legislators go that had arranged the visit. And Patrick Hope, Delegate Hope, told me that he found one person that had been in solitary confinement for 14 years. And so our legislation is designed to
that has to be dramatically reduced.
Yes.
I mean, there are some, that's considered torture.
Yes.
In other countries, and I think under the...
And it's a human dignity issue, you know.
It really is.
And basically, our bill would limit it to 15 days. And we want to eliminate it entirely for the mentally ill, because we're finding that a lot of mentally ill people they don't know what to do with them, and they end up in solitary confinement.
Rendering them almost incapable of rehabilitation without access to mental health services.
And our goal is that people that come out of solitary confinement would be better, you know, when they get out. When they come back to the community, 95% come back to the community. Today's prisoner is tomorrow's neighbor.
Absolutely.
And the idea is that they come back into the community better than they were when, and if they're in solitary confinement and go directly into the community, they're going to be hostile and angry and
I don't see how the overuse of solitary confinement is compatible with rehabilitation. And this brings up the whole question of, is it about rehabilitation, or is it about being or are our prisons being punitive?
Yeah.
You know, there's another interesting bill that looks like it's going to survive, HB 1600, Jeff Bourne's bill, which reduces long-term suspensions in school from 365 days to 45 days. And it looks like that's passed out of the House and is in the Senate. But to me,
those are common sense bills.
Common sense bills, and we have to look at why we would suspend somebody for 365 days, just as we should question, why would you put somebody in solitary confinement for 14 years?
Yeah, some of the existing policies are counterproductive.
They're not going to produce the results
damaging,
and they're not producing the results we say we ultimately want. So what other bills are you excited about?
Well, I was going to tell you, we were deeply disappointed because we had to have the bill withheld, but we did get them to agree to refer a study that was part of our bill to the Deeds Commission, which is well known for mental health, and since we're a big part of our issue is mental health, people with mentally ill people being put in solitary confinement, we feel like that's a good place for it to go. So
I would agree with that.
We're hopeful, but we'll be back next year.
Of course you will, because that is the nature of legislative advocacy. It never ends.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned before that sometimes it takes years. Well, we had a welfare increase benefits for families, and we had put a bill in like 15 years before we finally got an increase. So.
And we were talking about earned income tax credit. You were talking about the heroic efforts of Toddy Puller to get an earned income tax credit at the state level, and that took a decade.
Yeah. And the majority party at the time felt that the state earned income tax credit was, if they got one more dollar, which is refundable, one more dollar than they actually paid in taxes that were being returned to them, then it was welfare, and they would not go along with it. So we had to agree to a half a loaf, which was non-refundable bill.
Right, and we have been working on making it fully refundable ever since, and bless Ken Plum's heart, that is what he does every year, is introduce that bill, and every year it gets laid on the table.
Yeah, he's a fighter for the people that need help the most, yes.
He is.
Yeah,
so another bill that falls into that category too is this autism bill. It's SB 593 that expands the coverage for autism families from 10 to 18. Now this bill passed in 2011, Autism Insurance Reform, that provides services or mandates that insurance companies have to cover services for kids from 2 to 6. But often children aren't even diagnosed until they're 6 or 7 years old, at which point their benefits run out of 10.
Yes.
So this bill, SB 593,
it's very limiting.
it's very limiting.
Yeah.
So there's a great possibility that this too will be one of those bills that actually survives this year because of the incremental pressure applied by the Virginia Autism Project.
Incrementalism is the Virginia way.
I guess it is the Virginia way, tiny little bits at a time.
Yes.
So you've got another bill, though, that you're very excited about.
Well, it has to do with TANF, and because it's a block grant and the caseloads are declining so rapidly, there are savings that carry over to the next year. The state doesn't lose the money in the block grant. And so we're suggesting to use that to break the poverty cycle in these families. So to give the kids hope that they can go to college, just like the other better off families, the children can. And so if, you know, they get good grades, it'll give them something to strive for.
Absolutely.
It'll help to break the poverty cycle, but also if they stay out of drugs and don't get pregnant, this kind of thing, they can be included in this scholarship program where they can get either professional credentials through the community college, or they can get an associate's degree. And you know, the projections are by 2020 that 65% of the jobs are going to require advanced secondary education,
right,
just to even be able to compete for those jobs that would pay enough to be able to stay off welfare. So,
and that's Senator Bill Stanley's bill. He patroned that bill?
Yes.
So it passed out of the Senate?
And it passed out of the Senate 39-1.
Ta-da! Another triumph, John.
Yes, it's already in the House Appropriations, so it's already crossed over. So we have 2 bills that already crossed over, which is amazing.
So Appropriations has not heard that bill yet?
No.
And do you have a date for that?
We're watching the calendar. We hope it'll come up real soon, but we think it has good prospects there.
Yeah, it sounds like it's got good process.
We have a good. We have a good patron on the House side, Kathleen Murphy, which has an identical bill, so they're companion bills. So,
right, which is how it works. That's how it's got to work, is have a companion bill. And Kathleen Murphy is a perfect delegate to carry that for you.
She's very passionate about it. Yeah, she's very committed, yes.
As she should be, because putting TANF funds towards scholarships for deserving students who've showed promise is exactly the way to move, as you said, people out of poverty. When we come back from this break, we're going to be talking with John Horejsi of Social Action Linking Together. We're very optimistic here Monday night about what bills will actually survive crossover and possibly become the law of the land. So please join us after this break.
For all the papas out there, let's stop what we're doing and take a moment to be with our kids. They can be loud moments, goofy moments, dorky moments. It doesn't really matter. Every time dads take a moment to be with their kids, it's pretty momentous. So let's all take a moment to make a moment today.
Hey, did you know that 2.4 million loving cats and dogs in shelters and rescues need our help to find a home? Go to theshelterpetproject.org and search your local shelters and rescues. Go for a cuddle with your next best friend. Adopt.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
We cannot be bystanders.
We can stop to make sure someone is okay.
We can warn someone when their drink isn't safe.
And disrupt the situation.
We can.
Get someone a cab.
Or walk them home safely.
We can make campuses safer for our friends.
Our roommates.
Our classmates. Our fellow human beings.
We cannot be bystanders.
We can.
Intervene.
It's on us.
All of us.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
When it comes to saving money,
What?
don't act like a baby.
Oh, it's like they're having their own little meeting.
This is so humiliating.
Be the boss.
I'm the boss.
What the?
Power nap. You were saying.
And make a budget.
Let's get to work.
Need a little help?
Stacy, read back the notes.
I can't read. What's it say?
Create a personalized savings plan and get other tools and tips
We can share.
You obviously didn't go to business school.
at feedthepig.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Tonight we're doing sort of a legislative update just before crossover happens to see where some of the bills we're watching happen to be at the moment. Joining me in this segment is John Horejsi. He is from Social Action Linking Together. He's been working at legislative advocacy since 1983. Thank you so much for being here.
Delighted.
So we had a question come in from Michael in Springfield asking about a bill he's following about lunch shaming, or at least that's how the bill's being referred to. And this is the practice of making kids wear stickers home when their lunch accounts are overdrawn.
Our bill is to put the responsibility on the parents and not on the children. And the shame of it is, the shaming is that it stigmatizes the kids. The other kids make fun of them. In some schools, it's worse than others. We've been hearing where they actually, the kids get a hot meal, but the kids who didn't have enough money, who are behind, they either don't get any food or they get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you've even heard about where they get a regular meal, but then they dump it in the trash in front of the other kids. So the kids are shamed and stigmatized.
It is very stigmatizing.
And the Department of Agriculture has said that this goes on in 60% of the schools in the country, that there's some form of shaming. So I think locally we've identified where in one jurisdiction, district, they go home with a big orange sticker. Yes, so they stand out. And so all the other kids know why, or they're maybe stamped on their hands, you know, so it's
really rather shocking.
Yes.
You know, I understand the need to pay the lunch accounts, but making the children be the messengers
you know,
of that.
and it assumes that the parents are deadbeats, and they're not necessarily. You know, they may have the car broke down in order to keep their job. They had to spend the money on the car, and they don't have the money for the lunch for this particular period of time. So
who's
they
championing?
need to work with the parents around setting up some kind of account, or
They definitely do.
Yeah.
And they're just, you know, this to me seems like it's a process problem.
Yes.
You know, and again, one of my bills that was killed was the community school bill, which would create community school model, and a lot of community partners come in to solve problems like that or help to facilitate meeting those kinds of needs. Tell us who's championing that bill for you.
Delegate Patrick Hope, and it's HB 50. And it's on the fast track. We, at this point, we're hopeful, so we keep our fingers crossed. You never know.
So where is it? Has it been voted on in one of the chambers?
I'm just thinking HB 50. It came out of education, 22 to nothing in the House. Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
all right. So it's on its way.
And you know, the roadblock sometimes is appropriations, but there's no reason that this would go to appropriations. So I think it should go from education directly to the floor.
To the floor.
Yeah,
well, that would be great.
From my understanding of the way things happen, but a lot of times there's some landmines and detours.
Yeah, there are a few detours.
Surprises, I guess, is a kinder word.
A kinder word. And we do try to be very genteel here in Virginia.
Yes.
That's kind of the Virginia way. So what else are you watching?
Well, I'm just, our kinship
guardianship bill.
And, you know, there's a lot of something going around called grandparents raising grandchildren.
Right.
And it was, at one point, I got word that in the TANF program that 40% of the cases were in relative care. There's the parent is absent.
Yeah.
The parent is absent. So I got somebody in the governor's office to get some information on what's going on. And Jane Brown came back and she says, just astounding, so many of these kids have a parent in prison. That's why they're with relatives. Well, in foster care, if two children were in foster care that are, like preteen and at a younger age, they get about $1,300. That foster care family get about $1,300 a month
for their care and feeding and housing and.
And if they're in relative care under TANF, they only get about $200 a month.
Oh wow, that's a huge
and this would be the same
burden.
kid. Just
same requirements.
Yeah. So basically, this is to and we've looked at the studies, and the studies show that kids are better off when they're living with relatives than when they go into foster care. Strikingly better off emotionally and in every way. So we put in this bill that if the relatives are willing to take them on a long-term basis, and then they could be transferred from foster care to the relative. And that's very beneficial for the children. The outcomes show that those kids thrive in relative care generally.
It makes sense.
In fact, my mother died when I was 3, and I grew up in relative care, and I know what sacrifices they make. And we know that the relatives in these TANF cases are predominantly like grandparents. They're ready to retire, or they
are retired, living on a fixed income.
Yeah, and they have to go back to work because they have to support these kids because they can't support them on a couple $100 a month for 2 kids.
Do you think some of this may be the result of the opioid epidemic too?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I think part of the issue that we have with the opioid epidemic, besides the amazing deaths, is that people are either in rehab programs or in fact they are in jail.
Yes.
And so where do the kids go? And I can imagine that not only is the foster care system burdened by that, but again, they would be better off with family. That's a very emotionally traumatic thing to have happen. To have a parent become absent for that reason.
Yes. The family connection and the additional stability that it gives them, because generally in foster care they're moved from one family to another for short periods of time.
And a lot of times they're in a large setting, more like a group home, where there's a lot of unrelated children there. So bless foster care parents, and I think
absolutely. There's nothing against foster care.
Not at all. In fact, I think the foster care system should be reserved for children to truly, truly have no other options.
Yes, and this is to create a better option. The other option, the more favorable option for the benefit of the child, yes.
I think that's fantastic. And so that looks like it's got a very promising future.
It's for Delegate Brewer, it looks really good on the House side, and it's passed the Senate.
That's fantastic.
For Senator Favola, and she is really dedicated to these kinds of issues and priorities.
I think Emily Brewer is one of the new freshman delegates in the House, and probably the youngest of the freshman delegates in the House.
I think so.
Well, that's a remarkable home run for her to have authored or sponsored that legislation. Well, victory all the way around. And what else are you watching?
Well, I think that pretty much exhausts our bills, but I have some additional thing. The larceny bill, I think, is very important.
We should talk about that.
Yes, we've been kind of given up and worked on it off and on over the years, but I think its time has come. It looks like the prospects for a success to larceny, if somebody steals an iPhone or a pair of sneakers, or, it's $200, it becomes a felony. And if it's
you've got that felony record.
It's a dumb decision, some youngster, and they have a felony. For the rest of their life. It affects their ability to get jobs and to get into colleges and
to get housing, to get a loan.
Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty much a life sentence.
Yeah.
And so I think our rate was the lowest of the 50 states, if I'm recalling.
Yes.
So for a long time.
We're tied for the lowest.
We're tied for the lowest, and that's been for a long time. So I know my Senator, Chap Peterson, has pushed to have it raised to $1,000. That's not where we got to. There was a compromise. It's 500. Back to our theory of incrementalism again. But we'll take that.
Yes. Well, that's a big improvement. That's a big step forward. It's not enough, but it's certainly
Well, I think what it's going to do too is to keep people who shouldn't be going through the court system. You know, when you think about public defenders, when you, and this is what Chap had pointed out, when it's over that $200 limit, it's a felony, you're entitled to a public defender. Well, why should public defenders' time be wasted on these kinds of cases?
Yes.
It's clogging up the system, the outcomes aren't good, people are paying for the rest of their lives for some stupid mistake they made when, you know, they were 20.
When they should probably be given community service or something.
Well, see, restorative justice, and again, I think restorative justice practices are starting to address that. There's a coalition here in Fairfax County. I'm actually doing a show with that organization on the 26th of February here to talk about how we do need to be redirecting to restorative practices, to restitution, and to have the offender, especially these young offenders, face up to the person who's been harmed.
Yes.
And to teach them the skills to carry with them. It's much better than just being punitive.
Yes, accept responsibility for their...
Right, and understand what they did wrong and how they need to make it right for the person that was wronged. So that's, again, something that I had hoped to introduce through the community school model, because restorative justice is one of the 6 pillars of a community school model. But I haven't given up hope, incremental, if not this year, perhaps next year. But I do think raising that larceny limit was huge.
It takes a great deal of persistence, I assure you.
I know, from the man who's been doing it for 30 years, 35 years.
There's another one, the driver's license. I just read that 39,000 people in Virginia are denied driver's license, not because they did anything wrong on the road, but because they haven't paid some court fees or some fines.
Yes.
And
this
to
really
deny them a driver's license means they can't get to their job to pay their court fee.
I know, and it's a vicious cycle.
Yes.
I work with Friends of Guest House, and women who've been formerly incarcerated who come out with those fines and fees that they cannot pay. This hampers their ability to find a job because they cannot get a driver's license until they pay the fees, and they can't pay the fees until they get a job, and they can't get a job because they don't have transportation.
Yes.
I don't know.
A vicious circle.
It is a horrible vicious circle. And so I think that is a great bill. Does that stand? Does it look promising?
It's very promising.
Okay.
I have a note here that it's SB 181, and
all right, then.
It's moving
SB 180
in the right direction. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to make it, but it's. I think there's a recognition, as there is with the larceny bill, that these bills are very counterproductive, and that there's a need for some corrective action. So.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. So SB 181 shows a lot of promise, and I want to thank you for being here to update us on all this. I want to encourage people to sign up for your email, which is always the most excellent recap of what's going on.
We'd love to hear from everybody.
Absolutely. So you can find the website for SALT. Sign up or subscribe to John Horsch's newsletter, and you too will be kept apprised of what we are working on here in Virginia as far as legislative advocacy. Join us after the break.
Every time I hear the alarm bell go off in school, I think it's an air raid.
A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed. I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close.
I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us.
But I know it's all gonna be worth it. I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words.
These are not my words.
These are not my words.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rigged out money. Nothing very nice. Holy smile. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow.
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent.
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
When it comes to saving money,
What? Parents!
don't act like a baby.
Oh, it's like they're having their own little meeting.
This is so humiliating.
Be the boss.
I'm the boss.
What the?
Power nap.
You were saying.
And make a budget.
Let's get to work.
Need a little help?
Stacy, read back the notes.
I can't read. What's it say?
Create a personalized savings plan and get other tools and tips
We can share.
You obviously didn't go to business school.
at feedthepig.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Tonight we're doing a legislative update as we head into crossover at midnight tomorrow, and we're checking in with some local organizations about the legislation and bills that they are watching. Joining me in this segment is Holly Seibold from BRAWS, and BRAWS is bringing resources and aid to women's shelters. Welcome, Holly.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much.
You're no stranger to my shows.
Excited to be back.
Yeah, and this has been great working with you. You've got several bills. This is your third year of doing legislative advocacy. We just had John on, who's spent 35 years doing, but this is your third year.
Right.
So let's start out by talking a little bit about what you have learned about this process as you have gone through it.
Wow, it has been enlightening. You know, it's been definitely a trial and error. You know, navigating my way through Richmond has been a new experience for me, but I feel like I've really learned a lot just by being there, watching and interacting with the different groups who visit.
Right. So you've got relationships with the legislators who've sponsored the bills, and you're going to be talking about all those bills with us.
Yes.
There is going through the process of committee meetings and going through. You've spoken a lot to the press. People calling you on the phone saying we would want to comment in a quote, and suddenly you're like on the 6 o'clock news.
Right.
Right? Like nobody sent you to school to learn how to do that. You're just doing it.
Yeah, no, I have an educational background. I am a teacher, and I just kind of stumbled into advocacy work. But luckily, I've had wonderful people who have really guided me along the way, like yourself.
Well, you've got a lot of grassroots activists too who are also learning along with you.
Yes.
Barbara Jones and Erica, and you've got the Virginia Menstrual
Equity
Coalition. There you go. And that is on Facebook. It's a group.
And it's been incredible because social media has been really helpful to us. We've been able to post information on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram and really motivate a lot of activists to pay attention, watch what's happening down in Richmond.
And to show up.
And to show up. A lot of them have driven down from Northern Virginia.
And and those who couldn't be there, like me, Barb Jones has been live streaming on Facebook, and so all of us can sit wherever we are and watch it on our phone or watch it on our computer, which has also been sort of magic.
Right. I mean, we've been working with women's groups from Roanoke, from Charlottesville, Virginia Beach, just, using the tool of live streaming and bringing it all together on Facebook, which is our platform to engage our activists.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the bills that have not survived, and sort of, do you have one bill that's hanging on?
Yes,
we got one bill that's hanging on. Start wherever you want.
So we'll start with the good news.
Okay.
So yeah, it's really exciting. HB 83, which is the bill introduced by Delegate Kay Corey. This bill would require state prisons and local jails to provide menstrual supplies, both pads and tampons, to women who are incarcerated in Virginia. A federal memo was put out last year that requires federal prisons to provide a selection of pads and tampons to prisoners in federal prisons. However, it did not apply to state and local facilities. So it's been working with Friends of Guest House, which I heard you mention earlier in the interview. We've been working with Friends of Guest House, really working with the women, the clients, to tell their stories. And then we took that information and used it to testify down in Richmond in subcommittee. Unanimously, it made it out of subcommittee. Republicans and Democrats both agreed that this is something that they'd like to see changed. Made it through appropriations, and right now, actually today, it had its second read, and tomorrow we're hoping that it'll be passed on to the Senate.
Well, so this is great, and so this concept that this is a basic need, just like soap or toilet paper. You try to take this concept to the public school system.
Right.
So similar.
Similar bill. BRAWS, our organization, has been working with local schools for about 3 years now, and we have found that this is such an incredible need in local schools. That that girls are not able to attend school, or if they're at school, they have to leave school. They're missing class, navigating a very complex system to try to find a pad, something so simple and basic. So we reached out to my delegate, Delegate Markim from Vienna, and asked him if he would introduce a bill that would require school districts in Virginia that serve schools in grades 6 through 12, and with a mandate that says that all bathrooms would provide those items for free in the bathroom. And the bathroom was a key part of that, because we were finding out that girls, no matter which economic level, were really just kind of struggling to get an access.
The teacher, hello, or the school nurse, hello.
Right.
But this is not so dissimilar from what was happening in the jails and prisons, where women had to ask for a pad, and there were restrictions, and there were delays, and maybe you got one and maybe you didn't. So there's all these barriers to simply getting something as necessary as toilet paper and soap.
Right, it's just an access issue. We just wanted to be convenient, and we wanted to be less shameful. I mean, just have just go manage your menstruation and go back to doing what you need to do. It doesn't need to be this complex web of access and affordability.
And so the affordability key, and we were talking about, girls in high poverty situations.
Right.
They're expensive, a box of tampons or pads, $10, but then there's a 6% sales tax. So tell us about the bill that's been called the Tampon Tax and how you want to see that repealed.
Right, the Tampon Tax was actually the first bill that we were advocating for about 3 years ago. It's again, same delegates, Delegate Markim, which introduced it the first year. Last year was Delegate Jennifer Boysko, and she also introduced it again this year. We call it the Dignity Act because that's what it is. Menstruation is a biological normal function, right? And so we believe that because it's an essential, that pads and tampons are essential to manage menstruation, that it should not incur an extra fee of 6% every time you have to purchase it.
For only half of the population, right? The female half.
Exactly, and there's nothing equivalent on the male side. And there are, I mean, if you look at if you look at what is taxed, you would be appalled, because random things like garter belts are not taxed, but tampons are. Head and shoulders are not taxed, but tampons are. And so it's just an equity issue, and frankly, we believe it's discrimination. So we've been trying to get this bill out of the Finance Subcommittee for a couple of years, and we were able to do that this year, which was an achievement. It did make it through the Finance Committee. However, we're really disappointed that it was stalled at appropriations. And the last subcommittee for appropriations was last Friday, and so from what we understand, unless they're able to do something as far as working into a budget amendment, it's pretty much done for the year, which is really disappointing.
Yeah, things just go to committee, and it's laid on the table. That's how they killed my bill. It was laid on the table, like, can we have a wake?
Yeah.
But it's such a nice, genteel way of saying it. So what is your fourth bill?
So we had actually
2 bills. You had 2 bills.
We had there were 4 bills that all were about the tampon tax.
Right.
2 of those bills were never heard. One of the bills was the Dignity Act with Jennifer Boysko, and then the last bill would have been, if it was heard, and that one never even made it into committee at all. If it was heard, it would have been just for sales tax, the sales tax holiday weekend when you go back to school in August and September. Right. And so basically, since we couldn't necessarily get the sales tax removed for the entire year, we were hoping at least to give a little break to hardworking families one weekend out of the year when they're going back and shopping for essential back-to-school items, because as you know, this is an essential back-to-school item.
Right.
Girls can't go to school without them.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me about what you're going to do going forward.
Right. Okay. So we're still tracking HB 83, and
people should keep an eye on it.
Keep an eye on that. People should keep following it, writing, calling, doing what they need to do to make sure that bill continues. Moving forward, we want to continue advocating for these issues, raising awareness, getting people involved, and really destigmatizing the taboo nature of menstruation, so that when our legislators go back, it's something that we can again talk about, and we'll have more people coming and talking about it and testifying and telling their stories.
I thought one of the greatest things were when you had had 2 young girls who were there testifying around the school bill. And a woman came up after them and said, you know, it's just remarkable that they can talk about this so much more comfortably than most of us in this room can. But it's the generation we were raised in. Like, I'm older than you are. Like, you know, you just you didn't want to make other people feel uncomfortable, so you hid your tampon or you managed it. We didn't talk about it.
I grew up that exact same way.
Right?
I've actually met with some women who are like pro-women, belong to all the feminist groups you can think of, and they said that even whenever they skip their period, they still hide their tampon and walk to the bathroom.
Yeah, it's like it's just something we don't like. Nice people, polite people don't. But these girls, these young women, and I love these young women that you take around with you. These young women in training, and they just stand up there and say, "Well, this is what we need to have, and this is how it is right now. We have to call them penguins and turtles."
Yes.
Oh my.
Right. And that's what they want. These girls say, we don't want to feel shamed when we have our period. We don't want our friends to have to feel embarrassed to ask a teacher for it. So it's really important that you change the law so that it better reflects the needs of my colleagues, my kids, my my friends. And so these girls are really the next generation. We really love having them part of our leadership team, where they come with us and they come and speak. And I think their stories are so instrumental to the movement.
I do too. And you've taken them to Capitol Hill as well.
Yes.
And so you're not just doing this, you've testified in DC, where they have also kind of passed, it's an unfunded mandate right now. I think that came up in one of the committee hearings that I recall.
Yes.
It's an unfunded mandate. We don't want those in Virginia.
Right.
But there is federal legislation.
Yes. Congresswoman Grace Meng has federal legislation called the Menstrual Equity Act for All, and that would require workplaces to provide products in their bathrooms. It would require their different Medicaids to include it on the state level. There's like a ton of different ways that it would increase access and affordability of menstrual supplies, but that's kind of stalled as well in Congress. So we try to advocate on behalf of that bill. She has a second one that actually is supposed to help raise awareness about the ingredients in tampons.
Oh yes. That's a whole separate thing, and that is because they're of trademark secrets or whatever. They're not required. Things that you are putting into your body, we don't know what kind of bleaches, what kind of materials, what kind of toxins, no idea, and manufacturers are not required to list those things.
If you look at the package, there's nothing about the ingredients on there, and so having those type of labels would be really important for women, because there's definitely been research that said there's links between different types of cancer and pads and the ingredients that are in tampons. Toxic shock syndrome, there's all kinds of evidence, so we would like to see progress in that arena.
So the last thing I'll say before we go is that you've got a big event coming up. It's Mardi BRAWS in February. I think it's sold out.
It is.
It's sold out. But people can go to BRAWS, BRAWS.org, and they can find out information about your legislation, how you're collecting products, how you're distributing products, to whom they are going, and how people can get involved.
And we always need volunteers.
Always need volunteers. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Holly.
I appreciate it.
So join us after this break. We're going to be talking to Kevin J. Hickerson, who is the Executive Director of the Fairfax Education Association, and we'll be talking about education bills next.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course.
Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
I dare you. I dare you to change the world. Yeah, you. getting that college education.
I dare you to be somebody important.
Like be a teacher or a reality TV star.
I dare you to stand up here.
To call the shots.
To be a role model.
An inspiration. An innovator.
To be a teacher.
Think you can change my life? Make me excited about science like you?
Have a career that really means something?
Then do it.
I dare you.
They say you don't have to be so strong, but this is my mother, my purpose. Strength is not optional. See, I lift her now like she raised me then, so I know my strength is super, but I'm still human.
Oh, look who's here.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. This is our Legislative Update 2018 as we head into crossover at midnight tomorrow. And joining me in this last segment is Kevin J. Hickerson, who is the Executive Director of the Fairfax Education Association. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Having you back. It's funny you should mention that. The last time you were here, we did an entire show on community schools. That was August 1st of 2016, and your first day on the job as the you're president, actually, aren't you?
Yes.
You're president of the Fairfax Education Association. So tell us a little bit about the bills you have been watching this session.
Well, you know, one of the things that we were very optimistic about at the FEA and the VEA was that, you know, we had a bunch of new delegates elected and they were pro-public education. And so they put a lot of bills together. And my favorite movie is Kill Bill, and unfortunately, I love that movie, but I hate it when they kill public education bills. So, you know, the focus this year was on teacher shortage, and you know, it seems like the General Assembly wants to do a lot on teacher shortage that doesn't cost any money, and unfortunately, it costs money to get public education the teachers it needs. So Delegate Krizik had an excellent bill that was out there called the Grow Your Own Teacher Program, and you know, it's one of those things where it's affecting rural communities and it's affecting Title I schools, and it's a great way to get your own locally grown teachers back into your community. And unfortunately, it was killed because it had a price tag to it. And you know, sometimes good solutions cost money.
It's called an investment, actually.
Exactly. And so what we also saw was that they want to take the easy way out and just give pretty much anybody with a bachelor's or a pulse the ability to get into the schools and teach in front of the students. And I don't know about you, Catherine, but if I was going to go to a doctor, I would want one that's has all the necessary requirements.
Who's been trained in the medical practice,
yeah, right? You just don't hand anybody a stethoscope and say, go out there and do a good job, doctor. It's the same thing with teaching.
But teaching is its own skill set, and to me, when you approach it this way, you're basically delegitimizing educational instruction, and the fact that people are trained to do this specific thing.
Right, exactly. And you know, I come from personal experience on this. I was a teacher that just came with a bachelor's degree, and they stuck me in a special ed class and said, go teach those students. And it took a long time. It took me actually going to get my master's to finally learn what teaching was all about. And so I see this as a pretty personal shot. You know, I want all of our educators to be the best in front of their students, because our students only have one shot at a great public education.
You're absolutely right about that. And so teaching is its own skill set. I have a bachelor's degree. It doesn't mean that I'm going to make the world's greatest government teacher just because I have a bachelor's degree in government. And so I do think when you're looking at people who've gone through a university curriculum to get a degree, because that's an additional time you go through a university program to get the certificate to teach, we're basically saying that that doesn't matter. And so teaching is its own set of skills.
Exactly. And it takes some time to be able to acquire those skills, but you get a heck of a start if you actually have the pedagogy behind it. There's also a lot of talk about reducing the amount of standards of quality in Virginia's education. One they were talking about is the librarian bill that's out there right now to reduce the amount of librarians in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the BEA severely opposes this bill because, you know, our librarians are just as skilled educators to be able to give our children the lifelong love of reading, to be able to help great research skills. And, you know, as we know today, today. Being able to tell truth from fiction is...
Oh, yeah. And library science, and it's called library science.
Exactly.
And libraries are no longer just a place where books reside. Libraries are becoming, you know, this epicenter that includes technology and all kinds of other things in libraries, especially in our public schools.
Oh, I taught at Chantilly High School for 12 years, and I came back there to the library and saw this burgeoning epicenter of just kids just running around, not literally.
Not in the library, unless it's quietly.
But they were going around with each other, and they were sharing, they were interacting. It wasn't just a place where you just picked a dusty old book off the shelf and...
You know what's really interesting about that? I funded a project in Franklin County, Virginia through Donors Choose that was putting board games into their library in their middle school because kids came in before school and after school, and they wanted them to have something that was not technology driven, not just staring at their phones or working on apps. So they were this project was for board games and card games and things like that. And I'm thinking, what a great idea. Of course I'm going to fund this.
Yeah, it's a perfect way. And the thing is about with the libraries is that if they reduce the amount in the standards of quality, we're going to go back to the haves and have-nots. In Fairfax County, we have the ability with our tax base to be able to have great librarians in every school. But unfortunately, in other parts of the Commonwealth, they're going to look at it as a decision of, do I put an extra resource teacher in or do I have a librarian? And more often than not, they're not going to choose the librarian, which is unfortunate. And you know, in Fairfax County, if it was needs-based at a certain school and a principal was like, nah, I don't think I want this, I don't want an extra librarian, and you know, you might have some schools that would go with one librarian over two. So that's unfortunate. So, but I do like to go with a little positive news. Please
make me feel better.
The recess bill.
Yes, man, that has garnered a lot of attention. It's like the bill everybody loves.
Well, exactly. I mean, who didn't like recess and running around as a kid, right?
It was everybody's favorite subject.
Exactly. And so, you know, I met two women from that were parents here in Fairfax County at a school board meeting, and they were like, what do we need to do to get more recess into our schools? And I was like, well, we need to go to the General Assembly and put a bill in. And so they started working on it, and all of a sudden it became just wildfire. It spread throughout the General Assembly, and people were enthused and genuinely excited to do something positive for children.
It's kind of like the viral bill, like viral videos, like the viral bill of this legislative session was the recess bill.
Right.
The way I think I heard Chat Peterson explaining it was the fact that it gives latitude to the schools to allow more recess without reducing the number of instructions hours required.
Right, and you know, but that's the thing, is that we're going to have to make sure that, you know, the schools are all around, especially with 200 opportunities here in Fairfax County to work with schedules. We have to make sure that all the schools are putting the effort in to make sure that our students have enough recess. You know, they find whenever you have more recess, you have more attention, focused kids. It's necessary. Trust me, I feel much better when I'm able to get up and stretch and walk around for 15 minutes and then get back to work. So the same thing with kids.
You know who sold me on this idea of more recess was a young man, a fifth grader at the Bishop Walker School for Boys in Southeast DC. Because I was interviewing this fifth grader, and he said, and I would say, what do you like about or don't like about being in an all-boys school? He goes, they give us a second recess. He goes, we get extra recess here, said this fifth grader, because you know they know we need to burn off all this extra energy we boys have.
Oh, sure.
And I'm like, this was like probably 4 years ago.
Oh, sure. I know that I would have been in deep trouble if I didn't have enough recess. I think we had a 30-minute recess when I was in elementary school, but that was a while ago.
But it was different then.
But yeah, but it goes back to the same fundamental structure. When we're talking about brain science and everything, kids, everybody, humans are better when they have activity. In my teaching, I would take my kids around before tests, before you know, they would have to learn anything I wanted to put in their brains. I would take them around for 5-minute walks, get them back in there, and boom, they were so much better.
Well, there's the oxygen circulating in your brain. You know, they keep saying that sitting is the new smoking, that it's really destroying the health of adults, but why don't we think that it destroys the health of kids?
Sure, and why would we want to trap our students for hours in a classroom and not have them move? Kids are naturally prone to movement, and that's what I try to tell educators across the county is that get your kids up and moving, and you'll be a lot better for it. Another bill that's out there that kind of crosses the line in terms of General Assembly authority versus Board of Education is Senator Newman. He's coming up with a bill that would change social studies standards of quality and actually make it a legislative function rather the function of the Board of Education. Talk about constitutionality issues.
Wow.
Yeah, this is one of those topics. It's came up and it actually passed 39-1 because apparently nobody wants to mess with Newman in the Senate. He's apparently torpedoing bills left and right if senators don't vote a certain way, which is kind of interesting.
It is. So explain what would happen if this thing actually passed.
Sure. So what it would do is it would allow the General Assembly to control the SOLs of social studies and take the authority away from the Board of Education, which makes all the education decisions on standards of learning here in the Commonwealth. And so we're talking about something that is unprecedented, has never been done before, and we find it kind of weird that it's being done at this moment when public education has seemed to have a growth of empowerment here over the last year. And so, we're calling on our delegates, both in Fairfax County and across the state and through the VEA, to reject this bill as a big encroachment upon the authority of the Board of Education. There was a bill through the SOL Innovation, or there was language through the SOL Innovation Committee the past year that reduced the amount of SOLs taken.
Yes.
And unfortunately, 4 legislators killed that bill after it was unanimously given the stamp of approval by the SOL innovation community. And Senator Newman was so powerful in the Senate that there was no bill filed in the Senate because he dared basically people to put this on.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the politics that are going on, and it all came down to a pull of the lots.
I know. Wasn't that the saddest thing? The saddest thing. What do you think, real briefly,
yes,
about having a classroom teacher as the new Secretary of Education in Virginia?
Absolutely love it. I've met Atif plenty of times before, and we've gone to convention together. We've been at his campaigns for Senate and for delegate. He's a thoroughly impressive man, and he comes. The thing is that you know the character of somebody when you just sit and listen to one person after another just talk about how much of an impact he has made upon their lives, not only in the classroom, but the parents that just come out and say, I didn't know what I would do if it wasn't for his help in getting my student what he needed. And so, you can just tell that Governor Northam made the correct decision.
I think he did too, and I also know Atif very well, and the fact that he's a former Marine, that he chose to go into being a classroom teacher, but not necessarily a path everybody chooses after the Marine Corps, and the fact that he stepped up to the plate and he's willing to take on this gargantuan task of overseeing our educational system here in Virginia. But I want to thank you, Kevin, because you were my inspiration for the community schools. I wouldn't have even known what they were had you not explained it to me. And I want to come back next year with your help and the VEA's help and the Department of Education's help to pass a bill that creates a process for community schools.
We'll get it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us here on Inside Scoop. Pay attention to the bills that are coming up. It's midnight tomorrow.